In a village where cruelty wore smiles and kindness was mistaken for weakness, one girl's simple act of compassion would shake the foundations of power. Chinara, a poor young woman caring for her ailing mother, gave her last pieces of bread to a blind beggar, ignored by all. Mocked by villagers and oppressed by her greedy aunt, Chinara's life spiraled into despair until the beggar vanished. When he returned, not as a beggar, but as a nobleman named Fire, the truth unraveled. He had never been blind, only searching, and what he found in Chinara was something the world had forgotten: true dignity. Stay with us until the end of the story to uncover all the mysteries hidden within. Let me tell you the story of a girl named Chinara, a name that whispered through the dusty streets of her village like a half-forgotten song. She was not a princess, nor the daughter of a great chief. No, Chinara was a market girl, calloused hands, sun-bronzed skin, and eyes that carried the quiet ache of someone who had seen too much sorrow and still chosen to be kind. Every morning before the rooster's second crow, she rose from the thin mat beside her sick mother, boiled water over a crackling fire, and prepared her modest wares: tomatoes, bitter leaf, yams, sometimes cassava. Whatever the soil had given them that week, her basket, heavy with vegetables, bounced against her hip as she made the long walk to the village market. But Chinara's story doesn't begin with her basket. It begins with the blind man. He sat at the edge of the market, just beyond the gate of carved wood and faded paint, always in the same spot. Back hunched, head tilted toward the sky, as though listening for something only he could hear. His robes were tattered, his hair long and unkempt, but his face, there was something about it, calm, unmoving, a stone in the river of chaos that flowed around him. Most people ignored him. Some tossed insults like pebbles. A few children dared to mock him openly, giggling as they snatched the coins others had left, knowing he could not chase them. He never moved, never scolded, just sat. Waiting, Chinara noticed him, the way one notices a stubborn weed growing through concrete, persistent and quietly dignified. On her first day at the market, she had passed him by. On the second, she looked a little longer. By the third, she left him a small loaf of bread, and thus a rhythm was born. Every day from her already meagre earnings, Chinara would pull aside a crust of bread, a sweet orange, or the last half of roasted corn, and place it gently into the blind man's open palm. He never asked for it, never said much, just bowed his head once, slowly. But one day he spoke. "Your heart is richer than the purse of a king." He murmured, his voice like cracked earth after rain. Startled, Chinara looked at him. "It's just bread," she said, "and I am not rich." "No," the blind man replied, "but you are seen." That stayed with her longer than she cared to admit. Now, not everyone admired Chinara's kindness. Her aunt, Auntie Rufie, a stern, heavy-shouldered woman with a voice like a stick breaking underfoot, was quick to express her disapproval. She had taken Chinara in after her father died and her mother fell ill, though not out of love, but out of obligation. Auntie Rufie believed in hard work, strict rules, and the idea that kindness was a luxury poor people could not afford. Again, you waste food on that wretched creature," she hissed one morning when Chinara returned late from market. "He is blind. He is useless. Why must you be the one to feed him?" Chinara bit her tongue. "I just thought if no one else will, then let no one," Auntie Rufie snapped. "There is no reward for feeding ghost child. You think kindness fills bellies, pays bride price." That last word hung in the air like a hammer ready to fall. Bride price. Chinara's stomach turned. She knew what was coming. She had heard the whispers at night, the visits from men with full purses and empty eyes. Chief Econ, a man older than her mother, had made an offer, a generous one, enough to cover her mother's medicine, enough to fix the leaking roof, enough her aunt insisted to secure their future. But at what cost? Chinara was only 17. The very idea of becoming Chief Econ's fifth wife made her skin crawl. He smiled too wide, his eyes resting too long on her face, his fingers brushing her hand with practiced entitlement. "I won't marry him," she said quietly, standing in the smoky kitchen as the pot boiled over. Auntie Rufy rounded on her like a storm. "You will. You think life is a song you can sing your own tune to. You want your mother to die because of your foolish pride." Tears filled Chinara's eyes, but she did not cry, not in front of her aunt. She packed her basket and walked out the door, but she did not go to the market that day. Instead, she wandered through the mango groves, past the schoolyard she once played in as a child, past the old well, all the way to the river, the one that flowed lazily behind the village like a silver snake. She sat on the bank, knees pulled to her chest, the world swirling with fear and fury. Why must kindness cost so much? Why must the good always be the ones to suffer? As the sun dipped low and the sky turned the color of ripe guava, Chinara heard footsteps behind her, slow, deliberate tapping lightly on the earth like a cane. She turned. It was the blind man, but how? How had he followed her? She stood up alarmed. "What are you doing here? How did you find me?" He chuckled a dry, raspy sound. "Child, I do not see with eyes, I see with knowing." She stared at him, unsure whether to run or stay. He sat beside her without asking permission, folding his legs beneath him, his blank gaze resting on the horizon. "I heard your heart breaking," he said. It sounded like thunder before a storm. She looked away. "You know nothing about my heart." "I know more than you think," he replied. "You wonder why the world punishes those who choose to love you. Wonder why bread shared earns scorn while cruelty buys respect. You carry a burden too heavy for your years." A breeze stirred the grass. Chinara wanted to scream or cry or run back home and beg her mother to wake up to fix everything, to take her in her arms the way she used to. Instead, she said, "I'm tired. I know. I don't want to marry him. You shouldn't have to. But if I don't, my mother will die." He was silent for a long time. Then he reached into the folds of his robe and pulled out something small wrapped in cloth tied with string. He placed it in her hand. "What is this?" she asked. "A seed," he said. "Plant it when the moon is high and the sky is clear, and wait." She frowned. "A seed, that's all. It is not what it seems." She looked at the cloth-wrapped mystery, skeptical. "Why are you helping me?" At this, the blind man smiled, and for the first time Chinara saw something in his face she hadn't noticed before. A kind of ancient wisdom. A peace so deep it felt unearthly. "Because once, long ago, someone fed me bread when the world turned its back. Now I walk these lands, looking for the hearts that still remember how to give." She blinked. Are you a man?" He didn't answer. Instead, he rose to his feet with a grace that defied his tattered appearance and faded slowly into the night like a shadow retreating from the firelight. Chinara sat there long after he'd gone. She unwrapped the cloth carefully and stared at the small dark seed in her palm. It was unlike anything she'd ever seen, shimmering faintly like a drop of oil in water. A trick of the light perhaps, or something more. By the time she returned home, the stars were high, and her aunt had already bolted the door. Chinara slept outside that night, curled beneath a tree, the seed pressed to her chest, and in her dreams she saw a tree growing in the middle of fire, golden leaves, a woman dancing, a storm coming. But what it all meant, she did not yet know. This, dear listener, is how Chinara's journey began, not with a crown or a prophecy, but with a crust of bread, a blind man, and a seed that shimmered under moonlight. And if you think this is merely a tale of kindness, you have only just stepped into the shallow waters. The deep end where truth and magic meet is yet to come. Are you ready? Then come closer. The story has only begun. Let me tell you, dear listener, that sometimes a heart can break so completely it forgets how to beat. This is what happened to Chinara after the night by the river. After the strange encounter with the blind man and the mysterious seed that glowed faintly under moonlight, Chinara returned home with the tiniest flicker of hope clutched to her chest. But fate, it seems, had grown crueler in the shadows. The next morning she found her last coins missing. The precious savings she had hidden beneath her mother's mat, carefully set aside to buy the medicine needed to ease her pain, gone. "Auntie Rufie," she whispered, "where is the money?" Her aunt did not even flinch. She was bent over the cooking fire, humming a song as though grief had no business living here. "I used it," Auntie Rufie said, "to buy fabric for the festival. You want me looking like a peasant in front of the other women." "But Mama, she needs the medicine." "She needs a miracle more than she needs your pity coins." Chinara's blood turned to ice. She opened her mouth to protest, but the words caught like thorns in her throat. By nightfall, her mother's breathing turned shallow, her skin damp and cold. Chinara sat beside her, wiping her forehead, singing the old lullabies from childhood, as if they could summon back life. But by dawn, her mother was gone, and with her, the last light in Chinara's world. The funeral was small, no grand procession, no choir, just Chinara, one old woman from the church, and a silence so heavy it pressed on her bones. Auntie Rufie wept loudly for all to hear, not for love, but for appearances. She wore a black scarf and told every neighbour how much she had done, how hard she had tried to care for her brother's sick wife and foolish daughter. And when no one was looking, she muttered, "At least now I don't have to feed two mouths." So Chinara didn't cry during the burial. Her tears had turned inward, frozen. She watched the dirt cover the only person who had ever truly seen her. And then she walked home on numb legs. But the world, you see, doesn't pause for grief. 3 days later, Chinara returned to the market, hoping for nothing, wanting only to lose herself in the rhythm of bargaining voices, clinking coins and ripe mangoes piled like golden suns. She looked for him, the blind man, her quiet stranger, but he was gone, not just absent, vanished, as though he had never existed. His usual spot by the market gate was empty. The old woven mat he had sat on was missing. Even the children who used to mock him shrugged. "Blind man, no, he hasn't been here since last week." It was as if the wind had carried him away, and the strange seed he had given her, still tucked in the fold of her skirt, still glowing faintly, she began to wonder. Had she imagined him? Had grief made her hallucinate? A saviour who never was. Life took a darker turn with her mother gone. Auntie Rufie no longer pretended to be charitable. She became a merchant of cruelty, parading Chinara through the village like a cow fattened for sale. The whispers became louder, the stares colder. "This one will marry Chief Bako," Auntie Rufie would say, gripping Chinara's arm like a leash. "He's promised to pay handsomely. And what else is she good for? Certainly not selling vegetables." Chief Bako was younger than Chief Ekon. Yes, but only by a few years, and no less lecherous. He had eyes that roamed like dogs off a leash and laughter that slithered under the skin. Chinara endured it all with silence. She had no choice. She was spoken for but never spoken to. Some girls in the village sneered behind her back. Others pitied her. Most simply watched, glad it wasn't them. And so, Chinara drifted through her days, neither living nor dead, wearing shame like a second skin. Then came the village festival, a day meant for joy, colour, and celebration. Music from wooden flutes, drums, echoing through the hills, and people dressed in their finest wrappers and head ties. For some, it was a feast. For others, a performance. For Chinara, it was a stage for humiliation. Auntie Rufy dressed her in tight fabric that itched and clung, forcing her to carry trays of palm wine and sweets serving the village elders and their swaggering sons like a servant girl. She must get used to serving her husband, her aunt said with a sneer. Let her learn now. And so Chinara walked, balancing a tray, swallowing her sorrow. The drumming hurt her ears. The laughter felt like knives. But then she saw him. Across the festival square, standing beneath a flowering tree, the blind man, only he was not blind. He stood tall, his back straight, his eyes sharp and clear, scanning the crowd with the ease of one who sees everything. His ragged robes were gone. He wore a tunic of deep indigo gold embroidery, catching the sunlight. His dreadlocks were bound with silver thread. His presence pulled the air taut. People stopped dancing, women gasped, children pointed. The crowd parted for him, as if drawn by invisible hands. And Chinara, who had not wept for days, who had buried her mother, endured insults and tasted despair, felt her knees tremble. Because there he was, not a beggar, not blind, but someone else, entirely. A prince, a spirit, a trick of the mind. No, he was fair. That was the name whispered in the wind that swirled around him. Fire. He walked slowly, but purposefully, his eyes locked on one person only, Chinara, not Auntie Rufy, not the chiefs or elders, just her. Auntie Rufy stepped forward, blocking his path. And who are you dressed like a peacock? Do you not see we are preparing this girl for her marriage to Chief Bako? Move aside. But Fair didn't flinch. He looked at her with eyes so steady, so ancient, that Auntie Rufy's words faltered in her throat. Then he spoke. I am not here for trade. I am not here for gossip. I am here for her. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Chinara's tray slipped from her fingers and clattered to the ground. Fair stepped closer. Chinara, child of mercy, you gave bread when you had none to spare. You gave kindness when the world gave cruelty. I asked for no favor yet. You gave freely. She stared at him, speechless. Do you remember what I said? That I was searching for something more valuable than gold? She nodded slowly. I was looking for proof, Faye said. Proof that in this broken world, a heart of kindness still beats. A pause, and I found it. He extended his hand. Chinara looked from his hand to the crowd, to Auntie Rufy, whose face was pale and slack with fury. Don't you dare! Her aunt hissed. You ungrateful girl! Do you know what I sacrificed? Do you know what I paid for? I owe you nothing, Chinara said, her voice calm and clear. And in that moment, something in her broke free. Not like glass shattering into pain, but like chains falling away. She stepped forward. She took Fair's hand, and the moment their fingers touched, the air shimmered. Not metaphor, not fantasy, reality itself bent ever so slightly, as if recognizing the union of two truths. Fair looked at the crowd and said, Let no one touch this girl again without answering to me. Then he turned, and together they walked away, leaving behind Auntie Rufy's howls, the villagers' stunned silence, and the festival that had tried to make a servant out of a soul. As they reached the edge of the village, Chinara finally spoke. Who are you? Fair smiled. Once I walked this world as a man, then as a shadow, then as a question. Now I walk again with purpose. You were never blind. No, he said. But sometimes to see the truth in others, one must first hide their own eyes. She reached into her skirt and pulled out the glowing seed. You gave me this. What is it? He touched it gently. A key, not to a door, but to yourself. Dear listener, this is where part 2 ends, with a girl who once had nothing, now walking beside a man no one truly understood, with the weight of cruelty falling behind her, with the promise of something greater ahead. But remember, this is not the end. This is only the middle of the storm. And storms, as we know, always leave something changed in their wake. There is a silence that can strike a crowd louder than thunder. It happened the moment Fair turned back toward the festival, his presence no longer that of a forgotten beggar, but of something otherworldly, dignified, commanding, and still cloaked in mystery. Gone were the rags. In their place, a robe of deep indigo stitched with golden vines that shimmered under the torchlight, and a band across his brow that glinted with a small but brilliant stone. The hush that fell over the festival was instant sharp, as though the wind itself had stopped to listen. Chinara stood at the edge of the clearing, her heart caught between disbelief and something wilder hope, perhaps. Her breath trembled as Fair's eyes, once blind and clouded, now met hers. Directly unflinching, he stepped forward. With each pace, the sea of villagers parted. Men who had mocked him only days ago now looked down in shame. Women who had whispered gossip now clutched their mouths. Auntie Rufie's laughter had died in her throat. Her grip on Chinara's arm slackened. Then he spoke softly, yet it carried, "Let the masks fall," Fair said, turning slowly to face the villagers. "You have danced, you have feasted, but now let truth have its moment." Murmurs rippled, the drummers fell silent. "I came to your village, not as a prince, not as a merchant, not even as a man with sight. I came as a beggar, cloaked in dust, clouded in silence. I sat by your gates with nothing but my bowl and my breath. I asked not for gold, but for kindness." He turned gaze, landing like judgment on each of them. And what did I find? The crowd shifted uneasily. You spat at my feet. You threw spoiled fruit. You laughed. You turned your faces away as though I were not human. All except one. His hand lifted. All eyes turned to Chinara. She, this girl, this quiet soul with worn sandals and tired eyes, she knelt beside me. When she had only crusts of bread to share, she broke them in half. When you mocked me, she defended me. When she had tears to cry, she still smiled at me. She is no one's servant. She is a queen in spirit. When the rest of you chose to wear crowns of cruelty, Chinara could hardly breathe. Her ears rang not from the crowd, but from the memory of her mother's voice, whispering that goodness mattered even when no one saw it. Now it had been seen. It had been seen by the one person whose eyes had truly mattered. Fair approached her slowly, and with each step, Auntie Rufie's face grew paler. "I sought something rare," Fair said. "Not riches, not fame. I have all those I sought proof that in a world driven by greed and fear, kindness could still survive in the heart of someone with nothing. And I found it." He turned to the crowd again. "You paraded her like cattle. You spoke of her as though she were less. But it is you who should bow, not before gold, not before a name, but before compassion, before the flame of mercy." Then with a grace, only born from great pain and greater purpose, Fair turned to Chinara and knelt. Gasps broke from every direction. "Chinara," he said gently, looking up at her, "will you walk beside me, not as a servant, not as a charity, but as my equal? Will you walk into a life that recognizes what you've always been, brave, dignified, unshakably kind?" Tears welled in her eyes, but they were not the same tears of grief, fear, or helplessness that had flooded her days before. These tears came from somewhere deeper, a wound being soothed, a truth being honored. She nodded, then reached out her hand. Their fingers met. It was a simple gesture, yet it cracked the earth under Auntie Rufie's pride. The old woman gasped, stumbling back, her voice caught between disbelief and rage. But no one rushed to her side. No one laughed at Chinara now. They only stared as though witnessing something sacred. Fair rose, holding Chinara's hand high. "Let this be the start of new stories," he declared. Not just for her, but for all of you. The drummers resumed, this time slow and reverent. The festival did not end, it transformed. Gone was the drunken shouting. Gone were the jests and cruel games. In their place came song, real song. Stories not of conquest or wealth, but of grace, returned, dignity restored. Later that night, under the vast night sky, Chinara and Faye sat beside the river where she had once cried alone. "You were never blind," she whispered, voice full of wonder. Faye smiled, a glint of mischief in his eye. "Not with you near." She laughed quietly, the sound unsure at first, then warm like rising sun. "But why go through all of that?" She asked. "Why suffer their scorn?" "Because the world doesn't need more kings," he said. "It needs reminders of hope, of who we ought to be. You reminded me, and now I will remind them." They sat in silence after that, two souls from different paths meeting at the intersection of truth. In the days that followed, Faye remained in the village, not as a distant noble, but as a partner in rebuilding what had been broken. He ordered medicine for the sick, mended homes in need, and more than once was seen laughing with barefoot children near the wells. But Chinara was never again hidden. She walked freely, held her head high, and when people greeted her, it was not with pity, but with awe. Children ran to her with flowers, women came to her for advice, men looked her in the eyes instead of over her head, and Auntie Rufy, she slunk away from the spotlight, her tongue bitten and bitter. For a while, she tried to claim it was all a trick, that Faye had bewitched the village. But even the wind refused to carry her words far. She faded as all things false eventually do. One evening, Faye stood before the villagers once more. Chinara stood beside him, adorned not in jewels, but in the same humble fabric she had always worn. Only now it shone, not because of gold, but because of the way she carried herself. Faye said, "It is not wealth that marks a village. It is not cattle or land. It is the way it treats its weakest. From this day forward, let this be a village of open hands. Let none sit alone. Let none go hungry. Let the story of Chinara be remembered." And they did remember years later when children asked about the day the blind man became a prince. Their mothers told them, "It wasn't the prince who changed our village. It was the girl with bread in her hand and courage in her heart." And so the story lived on, not in books, not in scrolls, but in the way people chose to see each other, to feed one another, to sit beside those the world ignored. In the end, Chinara had given away her bread, but what she received in return was everything. Thank you so much for watching until the very end. Chinara's journey reminds us that even the smallest act of kindness can spark a transformation no one expects. We hope her story touched your heart as deeply as it was meant to. If you enjoyed this tale, please consider subscribing to our channel for more powerful stories that inspire surprise and uplift. And don't forget to leave a comment below. What did you feel when Faye revealed the truth? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Until next time, keep believing in the quiet power of kindness.